Good evening, and welcome to Collinwood High School. I would like to first extend our sincerest thank you, of course, to Mr. Bibb and Mr. Kelley for agreeing to be a part of this opportunity. Thank you. Thank you to Michelle B. Jackson and the Cleveland chapter of the League of Women Voters for their expertise, assistance, and videography. Thank you to everyone in attendance here live and our Clevelanders who are viewing online. I would like to give special thanks to the following individuals and groups for their support, attendance, and work in making this event a reality. Cleveland Metropolitan School District CEO Eric Gordon, CMSD school board members, CMSD High School Network 1 leader Erin Frew and her team, Mr. Ted Ginn, Senior Director and namesake of the Ginn Academy, Mrs. Hazel Parker, Assistant to the Director at Ginn Academy, Collinwood Principals, Mary E. Miller, and Adam Dudziak. Ginn Academy Principals, Damon Holmes, LaWanda Jackson, and William Davis. Our community classroom partners, Case Western Reserve University and Sherwin Williams, Collinwood and Ginn Academy staff, and Collinwood custodial team. And thank you to all of our special invited guests. But most importantly, thank you to my students for all of your hard work and dedication in putting this together. My name is Terrence Corson, and I am the health teacher at both Ginn Academy and Collinwood High School. Yes, I'm at 2 schools in one day, every day of the week. Which is why this forum is dual-led by both schools. This forum is a student-led event in partnership with the Cleveland chapter of League of Women Voters of Greater Cleveland, and in particular, Michelle B. Jackson, who is simply awesome. We are using the League of Women Voters Forum rules. The order of speaking was determined by drawing lots, and the candidate who opens first, which will be Mr. Kelley, will give their closing statement last. There will be a 2-minute time limit for opening statements, closing statements, and all questions. Time limits will be strictly enforced. Timekeepers will give candidates 30-second warning and a signal when their time has ended. Questions from students were created and collected in advance. And I repeat, all of these questions, every single question was absolutely created by every student in the classrooms. They all had to turn in 3 questions, which we then selected and divided into categories and proofread and fixed. So every question you hear were created in some form or fashion as a collaboration by our students themselves. This is a forum to question candidates on issues of concern. It is not a debate. We ask that the audience avoid expressions of support or opposition to any candidate during the event. We also ask that you please do not record or film the event unless you are part of the invited media. I will now turn it over to our very special moderators, and I hope you enjoy, and welcome to Collinwood.
Can I ask everyone at this time to make sure your cell phones are off? Thank you.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Joseph Larkins. I'm a senior that attends Ginn Academy.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Renee Brooks. I'm a senior that attends Collinwood High School.
This is a question for both candidates.
Opening statements.
Oh, okay.
We're good.
Hi, we're gonna start.
Mr. Kelley's going to give his opening statement.
I guess my mic's on. All right. Good evening, everybody. I want to thank everybody for being here. And since the campaign for mayor has started, we have done dozens and dozens of mayoral forums, but we've never done a forum that has been led by students, that has been, moderated, questions asked, the videography, everything. And to me, that's extremely inspiring to see this happening in Cleveland, Ohio, and to see young people, this commitment and this ambition, I think is just outstanding. So thank you so much for doing this. My name is Kelley. I am the president of Cleveland City Council. I've been the president of Cleveland City Council for 8 years, and I've been a council person for 8 years prior to that. Before that, I was a social worker. I have been working in Cleveland neighborhoods every day of my adult life. I started working with homeless individuals at the Westside Catholic Center, worked with trying to help people that were coming out of the criminal justice system at community assessment and treatment services, worked at Recovery Resources, where I worked with mental health consumers that were in the jail, working with the judge and with probation, the court psychiatric clinic, to carve a path so that people could live in the community and not be ensnarled in the criminal justice system. Like many people in the city of Cleveland, I know what it's like to struggle when you're young. When I was younger, my father passed away early, we were on public assistance, our home was foreclosed upon, and I know that what it's like to struggle, but I also know that everybody's struggle is a little bit different. And as the father of 5 daughters, I also know that it's different. Every generation growing up faces different challenges. And I've seen through my own children that it's really important that I constantly listen and I constantly try to understand what is happening with my kids and with the generation that they're in. My daughter my youngest is at William Rainey Harper School. I'm a CMSD dad, and I really look at how the challenges of COVID, the challenges that we face, the challenges of the digital divide, how when COVID hit that we sent home 38,000 of our scholars, knowing that 18,000 did not have broadband access or a device. So it is really different challenges, and tonight I'm really looking to not so much tell you what I hope to do or talk at you. My goal tonight is to listen to you and really try to best understand how can your city listen to your concerns and how can we work together to build solutions. So thank you for having me.
We'll now turn it over to Mr. Bibb.
Good evening. I want to also just commend all the students for their hard work in organizing this important forum. As the council president mentioned, this is the only forum and the last forum, I believe, of the election cycle. And to see young people stepping up and showing their commitment to the future of our city gives me a lot of hope. And just a couple hours ago, I joined nearly 20 other young leaders in our city that cast their vote for the first time in this mayor's election. So I want to let you know that your voice matters, and this tonight is a prime example of democracy in action. I'm running for mayor because I believe that now is the time for bold, new, dynamic, visionary leadership to move our city forward. And let me tell you why we need a mayor that's going to bring a sense of urgency to this city. I'm a working class kid from the southeast side. I've seen from my parents an example the importance of hard work in public service. My pops was a cop and a fireman. My mom was a social worker and continues to serve seniors all across this community. And through their example, I was taught early that well done is certainly better than well said. Because of their sacrifice, I was able to go off to American University and study urban studies. I worked for President Obama when he was in the US Senate. I advised mayors as a business leader at Gallup, helped support a $1.7 billion business at Key Bank, but also I've been on the front lines in this community, fighting for more affordable transit, fighting for social justice when it comes to our criminal justice system, and fighting to make sure that every neighborhood has economic opportunity that they deserve all across this community. And for Cleveland to be that city of opportunity that I know I dream about late at night, we must do everything we can in this election and moving forward to get back to the basics So what does that mean? Number one, we gotta make sure we do the hard work of not only supporting law enforcement and giving our officers the tools they need to fight crime, but doing the hard work to reimagine what policing should look like and also bring real accountability to our police department, because we can't have safety and equal justice under the law. Secondly, we gotta move our city government into the 21st century. Our website is nearly 10 years outdated. When you call the mayor's action line right now, in some cases, you don't get your phone call returned. We must have a modern government to make sure we're addressing these issues all across the city. And lastly, education. And I know this issue is very important to you. We will not be a world-class city until we have a public education system that works for all of our young people all across this city. Because this city is your city. And if we can make this city a city that works for our children, then we will be that city of opportunity that I know we can become with the right leadership and the right mayor that will listen, not just when it's election, but when it's time to govern on day one. I'm looking forward to your questions.
This is a question for both candidates. When you become new mayor, how will you curb gun violence and gang and crime activity in the city of Cleveland? Mr. Kelley, you may go first.
Thank you. Gun violence, the spike in violent crime in our neighborhoods, is the most important issue that is on voters' minds right now. And it's not a political issue, it's not just it's on voters' minds. Young people are concerned, young people are scared. We need to deal with this immediately. I have a plan to deal with this that involves several things. First of all, we need to start with true community policing. I don't know how many folks in this room have seen officers who are actually walking the beat on bike patrol, on foot patrol. I've been doing that with the men and women of the 2nd District for years now. And what you find is that you learn a lot more by talking to people and really listening than you do by reading reports. When you just stop for no reason and ask people what's happening in the street, two things happen. You get better information because for whatever reason, there are those that don't want to call the police. Whether it's a trust issue or whether it is people think that police have better things to do. But we need to make sure that we continue to build trust by having more of a personal relationship and making sure that policing is tailored to the communities that we are serving. We also need to make sure that we continue with the parks, pools, and playgrounds program to make sure that there's an officer at all of our recreation facilities, make sure that the kids feel safe in recreation facilities. We need to continue to provide social workers and the support at the rec centers and train our staff everywhere to recognize signs of stress, of toxic stress. We need to make sure that we are interrupting violence. We need to make sure that violence interrupters in situations where we know that kids are might be in a situation where they've been a victim or witnessed violent crime. We need to do everything to make sure that our staff is trained, that we provide the resources to deal with crime where it starts. Thank you.
Mr. Bibb.
This is a very personal issue for me. 5 years ago, I had to bury my cousin who was murdered by his partner. Last year, I had a close family friend who was the 131st homicide in the city. She was 21 years old. And the data doesn't really dictate the pain and the trauma that we're seeing in our city right now. And as mayor, I recognize that it will be my responsibility to do everything I can to keep our community safe and secure. I believe there are a couple things we can do in the short term. Number one, we need more officers walking the beat, doing foot patrols so they're visible to deter crime all across our city. And we must pay our officers more and create a culture of policing where good cops can show up every day to fight crime and do their job. We also need to do a better job of sharing intelligence between our gang unit and vice unit when we see spikes in violent crime in all of our 5 police districts. I would also say that the next mayor must work proactively with the next U.S. attorney to make sure we're using every tool in the law to crack down on the trafficking of illegal guns, because that is the #1 driver we're seeing of gun-related homicide deaths in the city of Cleveland. But long term, we gotta be real about reimagining what policing should look like. That's why, as mayor, I intend to work with leadership in this community to add a 4th option to 911, around mental health. That's why I want to have a co-responder model of policing in all of our 5 police districts, because you can't keep fighting crime with a public safety only lens in this city moving forward.
Thank you.
All right, this is a question for both candidates. What is your plans on making our schools safer? Mr. Bibb, would you like to go first?
Yes, school should be a safe place to learn, to go to great after-school programs, and we must do a better job of creating a climate inside CMSD where you as students can show up and learn and study what you want to learn outside of just taking a test and studying what the test tells you to do. That's going to require more robust after-school programs in our schools, maybe exploring an extended school day so it is safer for you to go to school, and make sure you have a protected ride home or a safe route home when school ends. That's critical. I would also say this: we have to do a better job as leaders in this city of centering everything that we do in education around what youth want. If we don't center it around your voice, then we're missing missed opportunity after missed opportunity right now. And I don't think that more police in the schools is the answer. I think making sure we create a climate where young people can show up every day and do their best with teachers that love them and respect them is the surest thing we can do to keep our schools safe in the future.
Thank you. So the first step I would take is to spend time listening to the teachers and the students and the scholars on what is their sense of safety within the schools. Because my sense as a parent is that within the school, generally there's a sense of safety and security. However, it's that walk to school where I think that we need to be tending to the safety of our children. When there are incidents that may begin in school, that may develop outside of the school, in a playground, on the ride home, on the walk home, these are the places we need to make sure that we are tending to the safety needs of our students, especially those that aren't eligible for bus service. We need to make sure that we as a city continue to take down all of these vacant and abandoned homes that are on the route that kids walk to school, because they're not just eyesores, they're crime scenes waiting to happen. So we need to really continue to make sure that when we develop a safe route to schools program, that it is just that, it's a safe route to school. And again, I will always be listening to the teachers, I will always be listening to scholars to find out, are we safe in school? Is my perception right that it is really what happens, just outside the building that is the biggest issue? But only by listening can we really find out, the answer to that, but really that this route to school is going to be my #1 issue in terms of keeping kids safe.
Thank you. These next questions deal with police accountability. Mr. Bibb, why do you support issue 24?
I support issue 24 because it's the right thing to do. Let me tell you why it's the right thing to do. Number one, over the last 2 years, we as a city have spent your hard-earned tax dollars on paying over $30 million over the last decade working to settle police misconduct claims. That tells me that the way we police in our community is broken. Even right now, with the consent decree in place, police complaints are up year to date from 2019 to 2020. I would also say this: when I'm knocking on doors, particularly in our community, in the black and brown areas of Cleveland, many of our residents don't trust the police, so they're not calling the police. Now, if you don't trust the police, guess what? You're not going to call the police. And I believe that trust is the surest thing we can do to have safe and secure neighborhoods all across our city. I would also say this: we currently have a civilian re-oversight board that makes recommendations on police misconduct complaints to the mayor, the chief of police, and the safety director. And now, when you see a complaint, the mayor, the chief of police, and safety director can overturn that complaint. To me, that's not real accountability. And lastly, as a son of a cop, I want to be very clear about this. This is not defunding the police. What this is that it creates measures in place to make sure that if you're a resident in this city and you experience police misconduct, you have true and adequate representation and equal justice under the law. To me, that is good policing, and it's what we should be focused on in the city of Cleveland.
Thank you, Mr. Bibb. Mr. Kelley, this is for you. Why are you against issue 24?
Thank you. For this question, I want to speak just to the young people that are with us today. When a political campaign comes up, whether it's a candidate or an issue campaign, you have to make sure that you look behind the buzzwords, behind the way it's being presented, and really get to what is at the core of that candidate, what is at the core of the issue. Because words like accountability and reform are used, oftentimes people think that that is the right direction to go. But there's also another way to look at this, is that people from outside the city of Cleveland are really preying on a tragedy that took place to forward a political agenda that is not ours. The problem with issue 24 is it would lead to less accountability. It would lead to less reform, because we would be setting up, just think of this, we're going to elect a mayor, hopefully me, in November. The mayor has the power to fire the chief of police, the safety director. The mayor is where the authority is on policing, and the last stop, the buck stops there. If we set up two panels of appointed bureaucrats and appointed political people, they will have access to millions of dollars with no oversight. This board would be politic over police decisions. It is wrong for the city of Cleveland to take over $4 million out of what should be a neighborhood safety services and give it to a board and give them the authority to give the money out. If that's not defunding the police, I don't know what is. And further, it's probably not legal because it overrides every other section of the charter and a collective bargaining agreement, which is a contract with the police. You just can't do that. It's just wrong. It would make our streets less safe.
Thank you.
This next question is for both candidates. Since the pandemic, many kids have struggled with multiple things. How do you plan on bringing kids back up to date with school, sports, etc.? Kelley, if you want to go first.
Thank you. As I mentioned before, I'm a CMSD dad, and I saw when the pandemic hit what the teachers had to do in terms of trying to keep our kids on track, our scholars on track. When I would look over my daughter's shoulder when I was watching her at her Zoom class, it was really amazing to me that the teachers had to not only teach the subject matter, but they also had to instruct kids on, if you have a MacBook, you put this in AirDrop and upload. If you put this in a Chromebook, you can email it. So it was really amazing to see how we took a tragedy and did our best to get through it. And the district and teachers did a good job as far as a short-term solution. Long term, though, we have to deal with all of the inequities, have a digital divide, but we've got to start at the baseline. We cannot deny that we lost ground during the pandemic. We need to have a student-by-student assessment. We need to support those kids. We need to make sure that we give every child the resources that they need so that we will not have lost a year of instruction. There's just too many, we were making too much progress, and there's too many of our scholars were just, ready, kind of struggling. We can't lose anyone. The pandemic it's shown the resilience of this community. It's shown what we can do when we work together, but we cannot gloss over the fact that we lost instruction time, and we cannot lose one scholar in this community.
Well, this continues to be a major problem. I heard on NPR a couple of days ago that roughly 50% of all the students at CMSD are still considered chronically absent right now inside our school district. And I believe we need an all-hands-on community approach to make sure our young people are getting back to school, are getting the right trauma-informed care and services they need. That's why I would support the option of an extended year-round learning opportunities for young people so they can get caught up, because we all know the achievement gap was big before COVID-19, and that was only exacerbated due to this pandemic. I would also say that we have a unique opportunity in this moment right now to really think differently about what should public education look like in the future as we're seeing the future of work change. That's why, as mayor, I want to encourage all of our students inside the district to be exposed to careers, not just in high school, but in elementary and middle school. So by the time you're a junior or a senior, you have access to a year-round an internship, or an apprenticeship, so you have a straight-to-work pipeline to graduate with a good-paying job when you graduate from Collinwood High School. I would also say this: we as a city have to get back to this idea of the school being the hub of the community, where we have mentoring, where you get exposure, and where we have after-school programs that reflect your passion and your interests and desires. And I believe that's the surest way we can get all of you up to date coming out of this pandemic to be on a pathway towards greater success.
Thank you. This question is for both candidates. What programs would you put in the community to address the mental health crisis? Specifically, what extra care systems would you put in place to deal with the mental health, especially for people who lack the financial means? Mr. Kelley.
Thank you. Prior to being on city council, I was a social worker, and I spent most of my time dealing with individuals that suffered from mental illness. And what was true then, and is still true now, is that it is an underdiagnosed problem. There is still a stigma associated with it. There are still people that don't want to talk about it, and we didn't make sure that we take steps to open, provide an open forum, an open dialogue, make it comfortable, make it easy for people to talk about the mental health crisis that they are struggling with. I think that far too often, and currently this is absolutely the case, cost does matter. Your ability to pay does matter. Now, you can get certain services based on your diagnosis, but in terms of really treating the problem, it is very limited, and there are not enough resources in the community to deal with the mental health needs that we have. So we have to do better at that. Also, we really need to acknowledge the toxic stress that people are under, those that witness violence, those that have suffered violence, those that we can't think that somebody in your family was a victim of violent crime and that doesn't affect the child or the rest of the family. So we really need to work with all of those individuals that directly interface with kids, our teachers, our rec center staff, our library staff, to be addressing this. And we need to make sure that we as a city of Cleveland are always promoting open dialogue over mental health and making sure that we connect people to the resources that we have to treat mental illness, because again, it is the stigma is shameful, people are suffering, and we need to be more open, and we really need to find a way to listen to everybody.
Thank you. Mr. Bibb.
This is a crisis for our young people in our city. We have one of the highest teen suicide rates in the nation right now in Cleveland. And particularly in my community, in the Black community, we must do a better job of talking about mental health and what it means, and being open about talking about things like depression, anxiety. Those things go a long way, and having those conversations are very important. I would also say that we must think differently about our curriculum inside CMSD to have these conversations. Someone I admire a lot, an activist by the name of Archie Green, has this really cool curriculum called Peeled and Layers Back, where he looks at the intersection of hip hop and mental health to really give young people an idea on why it's important to talk about these issues so they can talk about them with the confidence to ask for help when they need it. I think that's critical. I will also say, when I was growing up on 21st and Dove, the best outlet I had was playing basketball at Dove Park, or hanging out with my friends at the Zelma George Rec Center. We must do a better job in the city of investing in public spaces for young people to go and live and play and meet people and have a release. That's why I support having a dedicated, separate parks department inside the city of Cleveland that is focused on making sure that regardless if you're in Mount Pleasant or in West Park, you have a great park to go through to within 10 minutes of where you live. Finally, we don't have a dedicated mental health facility in the city of Cleveland. It's past time we invest in mental health and stop focusing on building prisons, because mental health works, I know as a son of a social worker.
Thank you.
All right, this question is for both candidates. Some homeless people really want help, but don't know where to find it, and leaving them on the streets isn't going to help. So how are you, as the mayor, going to lower the rate of homelessness on the streets and give opportunities to support themselves? Mr. Bibb, if you would like to go first.
Yeah, you know, a couple months ago, I had a chance to spend an afternoon at the men's homeless shelter at 2100 Lakeside, and I was just blown away at the testimonials from many of these men that were really struggling to get back on their feet. And the thing that I discovered, which blew my mind away, was the fact that in some parts of our community, to access a housing voucher, to get any kind of benefits, you have to prove that you've been chronically homeless for about 18 months. That makes no sense to me. And so first and foremost, at the local, state, and federal level, we must examine these regulations and benefit policies to make sure that we have a housing first approach, so that if you need a home, there's an access to a home. In Cleveland, we also must do a better job of fast tracking more permanent supportive housing to give people a home with dignity so they can have the wraparound services they need to get back on their feet and live a life of dignity. I would also say this at a macro level: the next mayor must work more intentionally with the county executive so we have a very focused policy on addressing homelessness. Right now it's too fragmented. We need a regional approach to this long term in our city.
Thank you.
Thank you. Homelessness is something that should be shameful to our community. And I'm going to date myself a little bit. There used to be a time during political campaigns, during presidential campaigns, where homelessness was an issue. I would ask anybody to recall the last time in the 2020 election or 2016 election where you heard homelessness talked about as an issue. I can assure you it's going to be very hard to find. I've been working on issue of homelessness since the first days I was in Cleveland, my first jobs at the Westside Catholic Center, and I continued on that, working with the Sisters of Charity Foundation and coming up with a Housing First program and really looking to build permanent supportive housing. That has been our best tool for ending homelessness for homeless individuals. We have one problem that we have not yet solved, and that is the unsheltered homeless problem. And there are those folks that, for whatever reason, do not want the services that are being offered. And the Sisters of Charity have come up with different approaches towards that. We just have not solved that yet, and we have to make sure we focus on that, because I can't predict a lot, but I can assure you the cold weather is coming, and we can't afford to leave anybody out in the cold. But that's the nut we have to crack. But another thing we need to do is we have to prevent homelessness, and the best way to do that is by focusing on the evictions that take place in our city. Recently, we put in place a right to a lawyer for people that are being evicted from their properties. You all know about it from a criminal perspective, but why should somebody lose their home without having representation? So we put this in place, and we've had more than 82% of evictions prevented, and we've also put money behind it to help people with rental assistance, utility assistance, anything they need to stay in their home.
Thank you, Mr. Kelley. This next question is for both candidates. What's more important for our city right now? Building new homes in commercial space, or rehabbing, expanding, better utilizing our existing homes and storefronts? Mr. Kelley, you can go first.
Both. There is a role for new construction. There is a role for renovation. I think we need to really look at our housing stock. We need to look at what are our housing needs in this community. We have a housing instability problem in Cleveland, Ohio, and we need to figure out, how do we make better use of the structures that we have. We have 4,000 vacant abandoned homes that are on the demolition list. Are any of those salvageable? What can we do to preserve what we have? But again, we have to use the tools that we have to build where new housing can be supported. And if you look at some of the great projects we've done all over the city, if you look at the Glen Village project, for example, and if you look at 121 Larchmere, we're building homes. We need to build homes that people can afford to live in. We need to build units that reflect the needs and the housing desires of the community. There is no reason that we have to pick one path or the other. We have to take an everything, all the above approach to provide the type of housing that is going to continue to make this community thrive. And that means workforce housing, that means low-income housing, that means market rate housing, that means housing in every neighborhood in the city of Cleveland. I believe that every neighborhood in the city of Cleveland can use a refresh of their housing stock. We have the tools to do it, and we just have to do it now.
Thank you. Mr. Bibb.
I would also concur, we need both, but there's some other structural issues we have to address in order to meet the demands for this issue in the future. A couple things. Number one, in terms of the supply and the diversity of the supply and the quality of our housing stock, we have a missing middle where we have a need for more affordable and workforce housing. And because of a lack of that quality of that supply of that respective housing, we're losing many of our residents to Lakewood, Rocky River, Shaker, Maple, and Bedford. That's why I would reimagine our tax abatement policy to incentivize more affordable and workforce housing and more mixed income developments all across our city to make sure we have a hyper-local approach to housing in our respective areas of our city. I would also say in Cleveland, we do a terrible job of using the resources that we currently have. Right now, we only use 50% of all the money that we get from the Office of Housing and Urban Development right now. But other peer cities like Columbus, Indianapolis, etc., use about 80% of that funding to improve their housing quality. So we need to do a better job of improving the quality of the housing stock. I would also say this, just this last year, I believe, we had 500 applicants that wanted to get their paint upgraded in their home, and we've only done 11 of them. 500, 11 out of 500. So this is about getting back to the basics and making sure we have a building and housing department that is doing their job on day one.
All right, this question is for both candidates. The city is receiving over $500 million in American Rescue Plan money. What are your top 3 priorities for that money, Mr. Bibb?
My first priority is making sure we leverage that capital to bring back many of our forgotten neighborhoods all across our city. I grew up in the Southeast Side, and my neighborhood in the Southeast Side has not seen any real investment in generations. Folks on Kinsman, Buckeye, and Union want to see cranes in the sky like they see in Ohio City, Detroit Shoreway, and downtown. We can and must do this. Secondly, violence prevention is critical. I just spent about 30 minutes talking to the leadership at the Cleveland Peacemakers Alliance, and they're doing the hard work to prevent shootings. They're showing up to take care of family members that are seeing their family members die due to gun violence in our city, and they're crying out for help. We need to make sure we are investing in organizations like that all across our community to prevent violence before it stops. Lastly, we must use this money to eradicate the lead paint crisis. As many activists have said all across our city, the lead paint crisis is public enemy number 1, and I support using $17 million of the American Rescue Plan dollars to help support an endowment that would eradicate the lead paint crisis for once and all in Cleveland.
Thank you. Mr. Kelley.
Thank you. Our community, there's no shortages of challenges. And the biggest problem with solving these challenges has always been the dollars. And now we have dollars that we can attack these problems. First thing we need to do is stop talking about digital divide as if it's some concept or some unachievable problem. There are solutions at hand, there are models that work, we know it works, we've had plans, we've had ideas of how to move forward, we just haven't had the money. Now we have the money. Now is the time to solve this problem and stop just talking about it, talking about digital divide. As I mentioned earlier, think of all the scholars in CMSD that were sent home in March of last year that didn't have a device or broadband access. That is not a formula to move forward in this town. The United States Census is generally wrong on most things, but it's probably right that we are the least connected big city in the United States of America. That is not a formula for success. Second, we need to deal with housing. And under this housing umbrella we need to take down our vacant and abandoned homes. We need to deal with lead paint crisis. We need to set up a fund to help people fix up their own homes. Similar, like we do have a senior program that works where we provide grants for seniors to do their roofs, their porches. We need to open that up to everybody. We need to bring every house in Cleveland up to code. We need to deal with public safety as a third bucket. We need to make sure that we are using these dollars to deal with the surge in violent crime that we've had, give the police the tools they need to do their job. And finally, we have to start with at a base level that this is exposed food insecurity, which basically means people are hungry. The food bank has seen an exponential rise in those that needed services. We have to just understand that there are hungry, hurting people in our community and start there.
Thank you. This question is for both candidates. What made you want to be mayor for our city, and what are the qualities that a mayor needs to be effective? Mr. Kelley.
Thank you. I want to be mayor of the city of Cleveland because I love this city, I recognize our challenges, and I absolutely believe that our best days lie ahead of us. But I also know that government is hard. City government is not just something that you figure out or you learn as you go. It is challenging. We are always dealing with challenges, dealing with our partners or not partners at the state level, finding adequate funding, making sure the dollars get to where the people need them. It is something that is, I've spent the last 8 years as council president and the 8 before that as councilman, leveraging resources, delivering results. And I believe that if done properly, we can get to a better Cleveland. I don't want to go back to the pre-COVID Cleveland where some people were doing very well and some weren't. We need to get to a Cleveland where every neighborhood sees success. We need to make sure that we are investing in underinvested neighborhoods but the private sector has ignored for decades. There is so much great opportunity in the city. There is so much potential for us to get to the next level. And I just think that being mayor is the vehicle to do that. I remember when I was a social worker, how I first got interested in politics is when I was working in mental health, when I was working in the jails, when I was trying to help people find a better life outside the criminal justice system. I was always not sure what was going to happen the next year because those funding decisions were made by people in elected positions or people at administrative board levels. And that's kind of where I thought, okay, as an elected official, as a policymaker, you get to be that person that can do good things for people, that you can direct those resources, you can have a vision for the city, you can make sure that every one of our residents is brought along in our recovery. We do not leave anyone behind. I just think that there's just such great potential. I hope you'll consider supporting it.
Thank you. Mr. Bibb?
I'm not supposed to be here. I'm not. I grew up on one of the toughest blocks in the city at the height of the crack epidemic. I grew up seeing dope boys selling dope every single day. My grandma was so scared that she held a shotgun in my front porch every single day, not knowing what was gonna go down. My parents divorced when I was 4. My dad was a high school dropout. My mom could barely read or write until her 30s. I'm not supposed to be here. How did I get here? There was a librarian, Miss Patterson, who looked out for me. There was a pastor, Reverend Stewart, who looked out for me. There was Alan Krulak at Look Up to Cleveland, who looked out for me. There was an admissions officer at American University who gave a kid with a 2.5 GPA a shot. My parents said, too much is given, much is required. I'm running for mayor because I want to see you run for mayor in 17 years. That's why I'm in this race. And I'm in this race because I believe we cannot afford more of the same old, same old. Enough is enough. And we gotta stop being okay with complacency in the city. And we gotta raise our level of expectations. And we have to stop being tricked by the same political rhetoric that has gotten our city to where we are right now. That's why I believe I'm the right leader for the right time. And that's why I'm in this race to be your mayor and servant leader.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, no clapping. This question is for both candidates. What is your greatest fear as mayor, Mr. Bibb?
The thing that keeps me up at night, thinking about the job, is having the emotional capacity and maturity to console a mother that is going to lose her child to gun violence. Waking up and maybe our city is experiencing a terrorist attack, and making sure that in that moment you can have a good team around you and show the right leadership we need to give people comfort, make people feel safe, and make people feel like their government cares for them. That's my biggest fear.
Mr. Kelley?
Biggest fear in government is you're constantly challenged with a system where there is more need than resources. And how you allocate those resources, how you direct dollars, has implications. Some of them positive, some of them not. And there is nothing worse than when you see a need, not being able to solve it, not being able to use the resources. So the gravity of the job, the gravity of being in charge of a $1.8 billion entity, the awesomeness of having to supervise 7,500 people and make sure that all of these people wake up each day and providing that leadership where they understand, where they wake up every day knowing that they are there to serve the residents of the city of Cleveland. There is no shortage of things to be concerned about. Every elected official, everybody that goes into this, you desperately want success. You want to make sure that you are serving the people that sent you there. And then you're just faced with the reality that there aren't the resources to solve all of our issues. If there were, we would have done it by now. And that's just the real challenge, is just understanding just the gravity of being the mayor of the city of Cleveland, managing this entity, dealing with gun violence, dealing with poverty, homelessness, and you have to own that every single day, whether you tried to help or not, whether you succeeded in a small way. If you don't succeed entirely, you've got to own all those problems every day, and that's going to be very taxing. But I believe I'm ready for the challenge.
Thank you. These questions for both candidates. What will be a major goal and an accomplishment you will have achieved by the end of your term, Mr. Kelley?
Thank you. Just one? Okay, I'll go. If I had to pick one, my goal at the end of my first term is that we do not have this shameful condition in the city of Cleveland where it's not that we don't have jobs. We have thousands of open, available, high-paying careers, but we are not properly educating, training, or giving skills to our own citizens that fill those jobs. That is something that should shock our conscience every single day when you think about that. We're not going to be the healthcare capital of the world if we cannot find the 4,000 nurses that are predicted to be needed by the end of 2024. We're not going to continue to be this hub of manufacturing if we cannot find people that are skilled to take those jobs. We're going to build a new headquarters for Sherwin-Williams, but we are not going to have enough local talent, enough skilled tradesmen within our community to build that. To me, we succeed when we deal with this issue of the mismatch between the open available jobs and the lack of proper, educating, training, skilling our workforce to do that. I'm not waiting for the next big thing to fall out of the sky. I want to invest in our people, in our industry, and our assets. Because what happens when you start talking about jobs? Well, if you look at the problems that we face, infant mortality, lead poisoning, crime, disinvestment. If you look at a heat map of Cleveland, it's all clustered in certain areas and certain neighborhoods. And you can't have conversations about alleviating all these conditions without dealing with what's undergirding all of it, which is race and poverty. And you can't talk about poverty without talking about meaningful jobs. And when we do give people meaningful jobs, that's when we will see results in health outcomes. That's when we will see results in crime. That's when we will see investment. So to me, this is the number one thing that I will focus on and I will accomplish during my first term.
Mr. Bibb?
So this is not a sexy answer, but it's one of the most exciting things about the job that really I'm motivated about is finally having a modern and responsive City Hall, because everything starts there. Being able to track your call like you track a FedEx package when you call the Mayor's Action Line, that stuff matters. Making sure we have a building and housing department that helps our seniors upgrade their home and so they can stay in their home and live a life with dignity, that matters. Having a parks department that makes sure we have quality parks in every neighborhood, that matters. So all the inequities that we see in our community, from our child poverty rate, to access to high quality broadband, to the fact that we are the worst city in this country for Black women, it all goes back to making sure we have a modern and responsive city government that is responding to the needs of all of our residents and making sure every City Hall employee is engaged at work, is aligned to the same culture and values, and that we are doing the hard work of providing high quality basic city services. If we can get that fixed, the rest of it is within our grasp as a city.
Thank you.
This is our final question. This is for both candidates. What are your true intentions and what is your promise to Cleveland? Mr. Kelley, would you like to go first?
Of course. My true intention and my promise to Cleveland is to serve you as I always have. To start with the values that I bring to the job, to start with my commitment to the residents, to understand that people are struggling. As I stated before, my motivation for being in elected office is that I believe that politics is a noble profession. I believe that government is good. Yes, there are bad actors that make everybody else look a certain way, but I believe that if done properly, government is an agent for justice. Government is an agent for change, and we need people to seek office that have these values. If you look at the time that I've been in office, I don't regret one vote I've taken. I don't regret any action that I've taken. I'm very proud of the fact that I conduct myself in a certain way. I have a personal rule that I don't do anything in public or private that I wouldn't do in front of my children. I don't, if you look, there's not, you can look and look, you're not going to find much on me in terms of, in my history. I value service. I value government. I think that it is the best way that I can move the city forward, that I can be an agent of change and help inspire other people to want that change and to build the Cleveland that we can have.
Mr.
I grew up in the church and I'm a man of faith, and the good book says that faith without works is dead. And throughout my life, I've always sensed a higher calling to always try to give back. And I've always been amazed at the awesomeness of what government can do. When you think about FDR, Social Security, leading the labor rights movement, when you think about the push and pull that Dr. King had with LBJ to pass the Civil Rights Act and Voting Rights Act, when you think about what President Obama accomplished in finally getting comprehensive healthcare reform passed in America for the first time in history, it shows me that government has awesome power. And I believe in Cleveland, we have an awesome opportunity in this election to realize the importance of government in improving the lived conditions of our residents. And the things that I value are the things that I was taught value. Social justice, looking out for your neighbor, recognizing the importance of racial justice and making sure we have racial equity in public policy, but also listening. I was always taught you can't lead the people if you don't listen to the people. Those are my values, that's my North Star, and that's why I'm in this race to be the next mayor of Cleveland.
Thank you. We will now do closing statements. Mr. Bibb, if you would like to close.
Well, again, I just want to thank all the students for these amazing questions. I think you both have a future on Meet the Press. So, hopefully I see you in a couple years on Meet the Press. But I really enjoyed this discussion, and we are just 5 days away from what I believe will be the most important election in Cleveland's history. And yes, elections are about choices. And the choice is very clear. We can embrace and believe that using Trump talking points like defund the police will further divide us, and that's the way to move policing forward. We can believe that attacking young people who want to get involved is the way to move forward. We can believe that undermining resident voice day in, day out is the way forward. Or we can say, no, we're going to reject the politics of the status quo and the past and really do the hard work of turning the page to finally bring this city together and say, you know what? We are going to do the messy, hard work of finally getting policing right in this city. To recognize you can have good law enforcement and good policing, but also good accountability. Because we can and must do both. We can do the hard work to make sure that we engage residents in really building a brand new city government that's going to understand the importance of resident voice day in and day out when it's not an election cycle. And we can do the hard work to make sure that your voices are at the table as we identify how do we improve public education for the future. This election is not about Justin Bibb or Kevin Kelley. It's about you. You are the future. We are fighting to make this a city that you want to come back to when you come from college. We are fighting to make this a city that you want to start a business in when you leave high school. We are fighting for a city that you want to raise your family in for the future. That's what's at stake on November 2nd. I hope you will join our movement for change because I believe that Cleveland can't wait. We waited for far too long, and now is our time to meet this moment for our city. Let's win this election. Thank you, God bless. See you in 5 days.
Thank you all very much. This has been a very enjoyable evening. And in 5 days, we will have a very important choice to make. And to this, I'm going to ask all voters to do some homework. We've got to make sure that everybody understands the candidates and the choices. To me, the choices could not be clearer. We need to move beyond platitudes and buzzwords and look to accomplishment. Government is hard work. It takes more than 16 months to get anything done. It takes time to figure out the process. To be effective, you need experience. You need to have some history of accomplishment if you're going to look forward to what might you accomplish. We need to look beyond the hypocrisy of rhetoric and what is said in terms of, you can call somebody, you can put out mailings with nicknames, you can call somebody corrupt who does not have a corrupt bone in his body and has never been accused of anything other than ethical conduct in government. It's all part of the business. But ladies and gentlemen, voters, young people, students, scholars, we are at a time right now where when I was growing up, we had a lot more in-depth newspaper, there were a lot more availability to learn about candidates, to read. You don't have that luxury. Right now, this election is about the future, and it's about who can get us to the future. It's not about talking about the future. It's easy to talk about change. It's easy to talk about being for something, being against something. Making change isn't that easy. Making change means building collaborations. It means working with a broad, diverse group of people. It means going to the community and really understanding the problem. It's knowing where the resources are. It's knowing where the resources aren't and putting together a solution. When you look at the city of Cleveland right now, if you look at how we have chosen to invest and prioritize investment in underserved neighborhoods, in Glenville, in Huff, in Larchmere, on Buckeye, which is coming, on West 25th Street outside of Metro Hospital, we as government need to direct resources to underserved neighborhoods. Who knows how to do that? We need to make sure that we continue to deal with our shameful level of infant mortality. Who knows how to do that? Who has shown example? We need to end the digital divide. We need to provide broadband access for all of our citizens. I've been doing this for over a decade in Old Brooklyn. We have Old Brooklyn Connected has been, it's my daily service. We've had it for over 10 years. I know the models at work. We can get this done, but we have to make sure that on day one, the mayor is ready to lead. The mayor knows how government works. This is so important right now. We cannot afford to go backwards. Cleveland can't wait 18 months to figure out how the mechanisms of government work. We have to take Cleveland to a different level. It's got to start now. It's got to start on day one. And it absolutely starts with you. My final word that I'd like to leave.
Thank you so much. I'll just let you finish that.
I didn't get my.
Because they're on the floor. He's not holding them up, but I was looking at the time. So just finish the sentence, please. Thank you.
Much appreciated. Last word I would like to say is that for the young scholars in the audience, those that are looking, please consider running for office. Please consider being parts of the solution. Please move beyond identifying issues, talking about issues, and get to solving them. Thank you very much for having us tonight. It's been a very enjoyable evening, and please consider voting for me, Kevin Kelley, on November 2nd. Thank you.
See me after class. Listen, I want to thank all of you for coming out. I want to give a super big thanks to Councilman Kelley, Justin Bibb, and a huge round of applause for my amazing team. These young people literally put this on themselves. We had 3 times as many questions, but we have an hour format. But I will tell both of you that the majority of the questions had to do with gun violence, drugs, safety in school. Second biggest set had to do with mental health and trauma. What I saw was compassion. The third biggest set was homelessness. So these young people are compassionate. They're living this day in and day out. When you come to this school, you walk the metal detectors. So these are real issues for them, and that you have to keep in mind, what happens. And I personally, I'm Michelle B. Jackson, I'm sorry, and I'm with the League of Women Voters Cleveland chapter. And I will tell you that I've been honored to have been part of this. This is my first time I've worked in a lot of forums where the young people did everything, and I just came in to just sort of say, here's how we keep it legit, keep it on the up and up. And it was just such a pleasure taking directions from these people. And thank you all for coming out. This is a great turnout, and this will be live streamed, and it'll be available like tomorrow on the League of Women Voters YouTube channel. So if you know any people who couldn't make it tonight, please let them know to be sure to vote, okay? And thank you all.